Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and I am back again with a quick little video about my experience going to Record Store Day. That happened just a couple days ago on November 29th. That was a Friday. It's Black Friday, and so if you're not familiar with Record Store Day, well, it's pretty awesome if you are a music fan like me, because there are a bunch, and we're talking potentially hundreds of releases that happen on that one day. And if you're a vinyl collector like me, it's pretty cool. So on Friday morning, I got up a little bit early, and as you can see, it was a glorious day here in Seattle. And I was heading towards a record store called Silver Platters, which is one of the larger ones in the Seattle area, because they have a bunch of room and, well, typically there are crowds. Usually there are people waiting in line because a lot of these releases are exclusive, and I'm gonna show you which ones I picked up. But thankfully this year there weren't too many people standing in line. I got there about a half an hour early, and the store opens at 9 o'clock. And once 9 o'clock rolled in though, everyone had their list and we all pushed towards the vinyl section. And the nice thing about Record Store Day is that there is something for everybody. Now, I'm primarily looking for rock and metal, but you can be into jazz, country, hip hop, it doesn't matter. They will have a release for that day. So it tends to bring out a lot of people who are big music fans like me. So the first release that I ran over to make sure that I got a copy of is Pearl Jam's Unplugged. This is from 1992, and this is such a great live album. Now, I'm not the biggest Pearl Jam fan, however, this was recorded at a time when they were absolutely on fire, and I was kind of concerned that since it is Seattle and Pearl Jam is from here, that it would quickly sell out, but thankfully I was able to get a copy. If you haven't heard this live album, it's absolutely just awesome. There's so much energy in this, so I was really happy to get a copy of it. Next up is a copy of Fight. So if you haven't heard of this is actually Rob Halford's band that he created when he left Judas Priest back in 1993. Now, what's cool about this release is that it's the first time it's been pressed to vinyl in the United States, and they limited it to 1,500 copies, and it's exclusive to Record Store Day. You also see here that they did a black splatter type vinyl, which is pretty cool. And this is such a great album from the 90s. This is back when Rob Halford was just on fire. He was coming off of Painkiller, one of Judas Priest's heaviest albums, and he just kind of continued that to Fight. An interesting piece of trivia about the Fight album is that it features a guitarist named Russ Parrish. Now, if you see a picture of him here, he might look familiar because he is the same guy who becomes Satchel in Steel Panther. Another album I was really excited to pick up that is exclusive to Record Store Day is Joe Satriani's Surfing with the Alien. This is the stripped version, and this is limited to 3,500 copies. What makes it stripped? Well, this comes on 2 records. The first one is a remastered version of the original album, but the second one is a stripped down version where Joe has taken out all of the melodies, so it's just the rhythm track. So if you're a guitarist and you want to jam over this classic album, well, you can totally do that. And Joe went all out on this album. It's cool because you can see here that the inserts have photos, they have liner notes. He even talks about something that's kind of controversial, and that is that the cover had to change, and he mentions that. So if you're familiar with the original release of this, of course, you know that the original version released back in the 80s had the Silver Surfer. And unfortunately, Joe admits in here that it's just become too expensive to license it for new releases. So that's why they had to change the cover. It's kind of a bummer because I like the original, but it's still cool here. So I'm really curious to check out the second album where he stripped out all the melodies and you can just play your guitar over that. I am not a great lead player. I'm more of a rhythm player, but I love this album, so it'll be fun to try. This store was also running a bunch of sales on their regular inventory, and speaking of Joe Satriani, I found this album called Squares. This is a re-release of Joe's very first band. This is a total trip because it's very unlike the Joe Satriani that we know. This is a power trio, and it's basically like kind of punk and pop music, but it's got, you know, lyrics and vocals. It's a trip, actually. I would say I don't love it, but musically it's very solid. If you like that kind of late 70s, early 80s power pop with a little bit of those British punk influences, you might check this out because you might be into it. Another album that got released that day is Frehley's Comet Live, and this of course is Ace Frehley, the lead guitarist of KISS back in the 70s, and this is a companion piece to a live VHS that came out in the 80s. So this is kind of a small release, but Ace does this pretty much every record store day, which is cool. So if you're a fan of him and collecting for KISS and KISS related stuff, this was a cool release. Really well done. I like how it's got the custom sleeve, and the album is orange. And speaking of KISS, since they were running sales, I also had to pick up KISSWorld, the best of KISS. Now, let's be honest, KISS release a ton of greatest hits albums over the years, but I do like to collect for the band because it's one of my first bands that I was really into as a kid. And this best of is pretty cool because it really does cover every single era of KISS. Obviously, there are the big hits from the 70s, but also there's a bunch of 80s tunes on there, which I really dig, and then all the way up to their most current albums. So it's a neat little, best of if you want the entire picture of KISS. So that's why I had to pick it up. Here's an album that I picked up almost on a whim because they are running sales, and that of course is Overkill, The Electric Age, and this is the Deluxe edition. Now this album was originally released back in 2012, and if you're not familiar with Overkill, they're a classic thrash metal band. I've been listening to a lot of them lately, and they are very consistent. And so this is an album that I just wasn't familiar with, and they had a brand new copy of it, so I thought I would snag it. This is called the Deluxe Edition because it comes on 2 records, so 4 sides, and the last couple songs are all live. And then they also included it on green vinyl, which looks awesome. And then another album I just found randomly is Dream Theater. This is the Pull Me Under single. This is on a 12-inch. And on the flip side of it is Metropolis Part 1. So 2 classic songs. I'm a big Dream Theater fan. I pretty much buy everything they put out. And this one, as you see here, comes on translucent yellow vinyl. So those are the pickups that I got on Record Store Day, November 2019. But as I mentioned, there are literally hundreds of releases that come out on that day. And I'd love to know what you guys picked up if you went out and got some. As I mentioned, it covers every genre. So this is obviously just rock and metal, but love to know what you guys got. So let me know down in the comments below. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.